I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but here I am. My name's Mike, and I've been married to Lisa for about 8 years now. Things weren't perfect, but I thought we had a good, stable life. She's got this sassy, bitchy attitude, always quick with a sharp word or a sarcastic remark, and honestly, that's what I loved about her at first. She's smart, beautiful, and confident. We met in college, hit it off right away, and I was sure I'd found the one. But things started changing about a year ago. Small things at first. She'd be late for dinner, say she was stuck at work when I knew she was. Her phone became a secret thing. She'd be secretive about it, always hiding the screen when I walked in the room. I figured she was just tired of my questions, maybe had a new hobby or something. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I could feel the distance growing. Then she started acting weird around certain people. Her attitude toward me became even more dismissive. I'd catch her scrolling her phone more than usual, often hiding it from me. Once I saw her get a notification and, instead of just ignoring it, she quickly grabbed her phone and turned the screen away. She told me it was just work emails, but I wasn't convinced. Things got worse when I noticed her spending more time out with her friends. I'd ask her to hang out and she'd come up with some excuse. She was busy, tired, or had to work late. I thought maybe she was just stressed, but deep down, I was starting to suspect something wasn't right. I didn't want to believe it, but my gut was telling me to dig deeper. Then the real bombshell hit. I was reading through some old messages on our shared cloud drive, because sometimes I just get curious, and I found some strange correspondence. Nothing explicit at first, just some weird text from her with a guy named Mark. I didn't recognize the number, but the tone was flirty, playful, even intimate. It didn't make sense. Why would she be texting someone like that? I kept digging, and that's when I found out about the court reporter. Her name's Janice, and I don't mind saying she's pretty, but she's also bitchy, always acting like she's better than everyone else. Apparently, Lisa and Janice had been exchanging contact info after Lisa's testimony in this huge lawsuit I was involved in, one of those corporate cases where I was a key witness. I don't know what prompted her, but I found security footage from the courthouse. I couldn't believe my eyes. There's my wife, leaning into Janice during the breaks, whispering, laughing, and then disappearing into a side office together. It wasn't just a friendly chat. They were meeting up outside the courthouse, exchanging kisses, touching. The footage was clear enough, and it confirmed what I suspected. They'd been seeing each other behind my back for weeks, maybe longer. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. At first, I was furious, shaking, heart pounding. I felt betrayed on every level. How could she do this? To me, to our marriage. I thought I knew her, thought we had something real. And now I discover she's been screwing around with some court reporter, lying to my face while she was out meeting her. I didn't even know what to do with all that anger. I wanted to scream, cry, break something. But I knew I had to plan my next move carefully. After I watched the footage over and over again, I realized I couldn't just let this go. The betrayal hit so hard I was numb for days. It wasn't just the affair. It was the lies, the sneaking around, the fact that she thought she could get away with it forever. I was furious, but beneath that anger was this sinking feeling of sadness. I kept asking myself, how did I miss the signs? How did I not see what was right in front of me? I didn't sleep much those nights. Instead, I replayed every moment of our marriage, the good times, the arguments, the vacations, the quiet nights in. I kept coming back to the fact that Lisa's personality had changed. She'd always been bitchy, sure, but lately, she was cold and dismissive, even rude. She'd throw jabs at me during arguments, call me pathetic, say I was too boring or too predictable. I thought maybe it was just stress or her way of coping, but now I see it all differently. That bitchy attitude was just a mask for her guilt, or maybe her excitement about sneaking around. The worst part was realizing she'd been lying. For months, maybe longer. I found her deleting messages on her phone, hiding her emails, and even going as far as changing her schedule on the calendar app, claiming she had to work late or client meetings. I started to feel like a fool for not noticing sooner, but I also knew I couldn't just confront her without a plan. I needed solid evidence, a way to get her to admit it if I decided to take this further. One day, I decided I'd follow her. I wanted to see for myself if she was truly meeting Janice outside the courthouse or anywhere else. So I set up my phone to record and I followed her from a distance. It was bizarre. She left the house early in the morning, said she had a meeting, but I knew better. I parked nearby and watched her. Sure enough, she headed toward a downtown coffee shop, but instead of going inside, she looped around the corner and there was Janice waiting for her in her car. They exchanged a quick hug, then Lisa got in and they drove off. I followed them for a while, watching them go to a nearby hotel. I couldn't believe it, they were actually meeting up like they were lovers. I felt sick, angry, and betrayed all at once. I wanted to confront her right then and there to catch her in the act, but I knew I had to be smart. I waited until they left the hotel, then I drove back home and started carefully planning my next move. At that point, I knew there was no way to deny what I'd seen. The footage was damning, and her actions confirmed everything. But I also knew that confronting her without evidence wouldn't go well. I needed her to admit it, to finally face what she was doing. My mind raced through every possible way to get her to break, to confess. I didn't want to just leave her, not without making her pay for what she'd done. I spent the next few days gathering everything I could. The courthouse footage, the hotel receipts, her phone records, even some of her emails. It all pointed to one thing: she was cheating on me with Janice, the court reporter. I felt a strange mix of relief and devastation. Relief because I finally had proof, but devastation because I realized I'd spent all these years trusting her, building a life around someone who was capable of that level of deception. I knew I had to confront her. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. The moment was coming, and I was determined to get her to face the truth. I just didn't know how she'd react, whether she'd lie her way out of it or finally admit what she'd done. Either way, I was ready. I was done being the fool. The day I decided to confront Lisa, I felt like I was walking into a battlefield. My stomach was in knots and I kept replaying everything I knew, all the evidence I had gathered. I wasn't planning to yell or throw accusations blindly. I wanted her to admit it, face her own lies. But I knew that wouldn't be easy. Lisa been manipulative all her life, and I was prepared for her to deny everything, spin stories, or even turn the blame back on me. I waited until she came home from work, trying to keep my composure. She was her usual bitchy self, sassy, dismissive, sarcastic, like she didn't have a care in the world. She threw her purse on the table and shot me a look. "What's your problem, Mike? You've been acting weird all week." I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone, showing her the footage from the courthouse. "You want to tell me what this is about?" I asked calmly but with a steel edge in my voice. Her eyes widened briefly, then she scoffed. "That's bullshit. You're stalking me now. Jesus, you really are pathetic." I shook my head. "No, Lisa, this isn't stalking. It's called being fed up with your lies. I followed you because I knew something wasn't right. And now I see what's been going on. You've been meeting Janice outside the courthouse. You've been cheating on me with her, haven't you?" She scoffed again, crossing her arms. "You're nuts. That woman's nothing to me. You're just jealous or insecure. Maybe if you paid more attention, you'd see how much I do for this marriage." Her voice was snide, but her face was pale, and I could see a flicker of guilt behind her eyes. I pressed her further. "Don't lie, Lisa. I have the hotel receipts, the emails, everything. You've been sneaking around behind my back for months. How long has this been going on?" She rolled her eyes and threw up her hands. "Look, I don't have to explain myself to you. Yeah, I met her. So what? It was just sex, Mike. It's not a big deal. You think I'm some perfect wife? Please. You're boring, predictable, and honestly, I needed some excitement. She's better in bed than you ever were." Her words hit me like a punch. I felt a cold fury rising. "Sex, that's your excuse, that you needed excitement. That you cheated on me because I'm boring." I couldn't believe how she was spinning it. I was furious, but I kept my voice steady. "And you think I'll just accept that? How long have you been lying to me?" She smirked and looked away. "Long enough. I don't see why you're so upset. Honestly, I don't even love you anymore. I was just waiting for the right moment to tell you I'm done. You're a good guy, but you're not enough." That was the moment I realized her lies were endless. She could spin it any way she wanted, but the facts were in front of us. I felt like my world was crumbling, but I also knew I couldn't let her get away with this. I told her she'd crossed a line, and I wasn't just going to walk away, not without making her understand how much she'd screwed up. I left her standing there, furious and cold, and went to get some space. I needed to think. I knew I couldn't just file for divorce right then and there. I needed to plan my next steps. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let her lie her way out of this, and I wasn't going to forgive her that easily. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing. I kept thinking about everything she said, her tone, her lies, and how much I'd trusted her all those years. It felt like I'd been hit by a truck. I thought about the good times, the promises, the future I thought we had. All of that was gone now. I realized I had to decide whether I wanted to fight for this marriage or finally cut my losses and move on, as much as I wanted to lash out and demand some kind of explanation. I knew I had to be smarter. I had the evidence and I knew what she was capable of. But I also knew a part of me still loved her, or at least wanted to believe there was some way back. I wasn't sure anymore. All I knew was that my life had been turned upside down in the span of a few months, and now I had to face this new reality. One where my wife cheated on me with a court reporter, lied to my face, and thought she could get away with it. The next few days were a blur of trying to keep it together while planning my next move. I stayed mostly quiet around her, not because I wanted to play the victim, but because I needed time to think. Every time I looked at her, I saw the woman I married, but also someone I didn't recognize anymore. She was manipulative, dishonest, and cold. I kept asking myself how much of our relationship was built on lies, and honestly, I struggled to see a way back from this. I also started reaching out to a lawyer. I needed to know what my options were, what my rights were in this situation. Divorce was inevitable, at least that's what I told myself, but I wanted my ducks in a row first. I didn't want to be blindsided, and I definitely didn't want her to try some kind of spin or manipulate her way out of this. I was angry, yes, but I also knew I had to stay calm if I wanted to get through this without making a mistake. In the meantime, I decided to dig a little more into her meetings with Janice. I hired a private investigator and had him look into their recent encounters. It wasn't long before I had confirmation that they'd been meeting regularly, sometimes at obscure places I never would have suspected, hotels, quiet cafes. The fact that she was so brazen about it made my blood boil. I didn't just catch her cheating, I caught her in the act, and that made me feel betrayed on a level I'd never experienced before. One evening, while I was out getting some groceries, I had a strange sense of relief and anger swell inside me at the same time. I realized I didn't want her to keep lying. I needed to confront her again, this time with everything laid out clearly. I wanted her to know I wasn't just some fool who got played. I wanted her to understand that I had proof, that I wasn't going to take her bullshit anymore. When I got home, I told her I needed to talk. Her reaction was classic, defensive, bitchy, trying to spin it around. What now? Are you finally going to accuse me of more stuff? You're paranoid, Mike. Her voice was dripping with contempt, but I kept my cool. I laid out everything I had, photos, emails, the hotel receipts, the footage. I told her I knew she'd been meeting Janice outside the courthouse and that I wasn't going to pretend I didn't see it. Her face twisted into a nasty sneer. You're crazy. You're just jealous because I don't want your boring ass anymore. Janice is just a friend. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. I shook my head. No, Lisa, you're the one making a mountain out of a molehill. I've seen what you did. I know you lied to me for months. I can't keep pretending everything's okay when I know the truth. She crossed her arms again, her bitchy attitude flaring up. Fine, you want the truth. Yeah, I cheated, so what? It doesn't change anything. I don't love you anymore and I'm done pretending. If you want to stay married, then fine. But I'm not coming back to a boring, predictable life with you. I want excitement and I want Janice. That was the moment I realized she was committed to her lies. She was trying to guilt me, trying to make me feel like I was the one at fault for catching her. But I wasn't about to let her manipulate me anymore. I told her if she wanted to leave, she could go. I didn't want her in my house or my life anymore if she was going to keep lying and cheating. The emotional roller coaster was brutal. I felt rage, deep sadness, and a strange sense of relief all at once. I finally had the truth, and I knew I had to do something about it. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I was done being the fool. But the pain of betrayal was still fresh, and I wondered how I'd ever trust anyone again. That night I couldn't sleep again. The images of her and Janice, the lies, the sneaking around, they all haunted me. I kept thinking about how I'd loved her, how I'd trusted her. Now, that trust was shattered, and I had no idea how to rebuild my life from this. All I could do was prepare myself for whatever was coming next, knowing that I'd have to be stronger than I ever thought I could be. The days after that confrontation were the hardest. I kept replaying everything in my mind. Her sneers, her lies, the way she thought she was so clever. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind, so naive. I was furious with myself for not noticing sooner, for not seeing the signs. But mostly I was furious at her. Her manipulation, her lies, how she used me like a toy until she got bored. I didn't want her in my life anymore, but the emotional damage was deep. I spent a lot of time alone, just trying to process it all. I talked to the lawyer again, asking about the divorce process and what I could expect. She had no real grounds, just irreconcilable differences, that sort of thing. But I knew. I wanted to make sure I got what I deserved, especially considering her affair and the betrayal. I was prepared to fight if I had to, not just for my assets but for my dignity. Meanwhile, I kept gathering evidence. I hired the Pi to keep an eye on her, just to be sure she wasn't pulling any Houdini acts. Surprisingly, she kept meeting Janice, sometimes late at night, sometimes during the day, always in some quiet hotel or a behind-closed-doors place. It was clear she was serious about ending our marriage, but she also seemed to think she could just walk away unscathed. One evening, I decided I'd call her bluff. I told her I was done, that I was filing for divorce, and that I wanted her out of my house. She scoffed, called me paranoid, and told me I was overreacting. I knew that if I wanted to make this stick, I had to do more than just threaten. I had to act. I started the process, got the paperwork ready, and made sure I had all the evidence in order. I also reached out to some friends and a counselor. I needed support. This wasn't just a betrayal of my marriage, but a huge emotional blow. Talking through everything helped, even if only a little. I knew I'd need to stay strong, especially when it came time for the divorce hearings. I wasn't going to let her manipulate her way out of this one, not after what she did. The day I filed, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief because I finally took control and refused to be a victim anymore. Dread because I knew she'd fight dirty, turn everything around, and try to make me the villain. I braced myself for her possible retaliation. More lies, accusations, even attempts to turn the situation around on me. I wasn't stupid. I knew this wasn't over. But I also knew I couldn't keep living in this chaos. The hardest part was confronting the reality that I was losing a marriage I once thought was forever. I kept asking myself if I could have done anything differently, if there was a way to save what was left, or if I was just fooling myself. But the truth was, her betrayal was so deep and so calculated. I realized I couldn't fix this, not without her own willingness to change, and from what I saw, that wasn't going to happen. So now I'm waiting for the divorce to finalize, for the dust to settle, and for me to figure out what comes next. The pain still lingers, but I'm starting to see a path forward, one where I can rebuild, where I can learn from this, and where I can finally move on. I don't know how long it will take, but I know I'll be okay. I have to be. Because if this whole nightmare has taught me anything, it's that sometimes the only way to truly live is to face everything head-on, no matter how much it hurts. The finalization of the divorce was, honestly, a relief I hadn't expected to feel. It was like shedding a skin I'd been trapped in for too long. The courtroom was a blur, papers signed, lawyers exchanging formalities, and then it was over. Lisa was there, smirking like she'd already won some battle, but I didn't care. I saw her for what she was, a manipulative, selfish woman who thought she could cheat her way out of consequences. After everything, I decided to move out of the house. I needed space to breathe, to heal. I found a small apartment, not fancy, but enough for me to start fresh. The process of packing up her things and leaving the house where so many memories had once lived was emotionally exhausting, but also strangely cathartic. I felt like I was finally reclaiming my life, piece by piece. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding. I cut contact with Lisa entirely. I blocked her from my phone, social media, everywhere. I didn't want to see her anymore, not the fake smiles, the lies, or her manipulative attitude. I also cut out a lot of toxic people from my life, realizing I'd been surrounding myself with some of her energy without even noticing. I started spending more time with friends, reconnecting with old hobbies, and even seeing a therapist to work through the emotional fallout of betrayal. Looking back, I learned a lot about myself. I learned that I was stronger than I thought, capable of surviving the worst kind of betrayal. I also learned to trust my instincts, a lesson I wish I'd paid more attention to earlier. I realized that no matter how much you love someone, if they're dishonest and manipulative, it's better to walk away than to keep pretending everything's fine. Most importantly, I learned that revenge isn't about getting back at someone. It's about reclaiming your dignity, standing up for yourself, and not letting someone else's betrayal define you. For me, the biggest victory was walking away with my head held high, knowing I hadn't let her destroy who I am. I finally saw my worth again, outside of the toxic relationship I'd been in. Now I'm focusing on building a new life, one based on honesty, respect, and self-worth. I still feel the sting of betrayal sometimes, but it's getting easier to handle. I trust I'll find happiness again, maybe with someone who actually deserves me. And if there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this. Don't stay in a relationship where you're constantly being lied to or manipulated. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply walking away and choosing yourself. Because at the end of the day, no one should tolerate being betrayed, especially not by someone they loved and trusted.